Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. Tonight, we are celebrating the release of The First Thing About You by Chaz Hayden, who is here with us tonight, obviously. My name is Jenni. I am one of the co-owners of Mysterious Galaxy, and I will be giving you a brief introduction, and then I will actually be staying and helping to moderate a discussion with our wonderful author here. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'll give you the very brief rundown and we're going to dive right into it. So on the right-hand side, you will see the chat. Feel free to add anything you'd like there. Exciting, happy thoughts for Chaz, congratulations, saying hi, all of that good stuff. That's where it goes. If you have a question for Chaz that you would like us to answer at the later part of the program, there's a little button, it'll say ask a question, and that's where you want to type it in. And once you type in your question, if you are looking around and you see other questions that you really want to make sure are answered, there's always an upvote button that you can choose, and that'll shoot it to the top of the list, and we can make sure that we answer those. You'll also see right below me a little button that's bright green, and it says books and book plates. That is where you go to help support our author. That is where you will get Chaz's book. And if you get Chaz's book from Mysterious Galaxy, you will also get a signed book plate. We have them. They will be sent to you as soon as possible. And that's really the best way to help support our authors these days and help us keep having events like this, is to really, show that support and read what they're writing. And this is a really wonderful book, and we are going to get into it. I'm going to introduce Chaz shortly, and we're going to go straight to it. So, all right. Chaz Hayden is a debut author who, like his main character, was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy as an infant and spent his childhood in and out of the hospital. The First Thing About You, he says, is not just about disability, but about friendship and love and all the things that a young person hopes to experience. Through his writing and his YouTube channel, he speaks with abundant positivity and encourages people to be different and leave a trail. Chaz Hayden grew up in New Jersey and now lives in Pennsylvania, where he spends too much time thinking about his next tattoo and what concerts to attend. Follow him on Instagram and Twitter, and he's at the Chaz Hayden. And again, we are celebrating The First Thing About You, and I'm going to keep holding it up as much as I can. It is a super awesome, colorful color. And it is also, Chaz informed me, one of People Magazine's must-reads for the fall. So that's really exciting.
Yes.
So congratulations. And I am going to briefly turn it over to Chaz to sort of tell us a little bit about the book and how it came to be and what it's about for those who haven't had the chance yet.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you for having me. So, The First Thing About You came out 2 days ago, my debut novel. So excited about that. Yeah, so it follows a 15-year-old boy named Harris who has SMA, just like me, and he rides around in a really awesome powered wheelchair, and his family just moved from California to New Jersey, and he's going to kind of take this as an opportunity to reinvent himself, be known as more than just the kid in a wheelchair. But he's kind of stuck on knowing everyone's favorite color. He thinks that by knowing someone's favorite color, he knows everything about them, like a snap judgment, just the same way that he assumes everyone judges him as soon as they see his wheelchair. So along the way, he'll befriend Xander, who's yellow. He'll have someone that he has a little bit of a crush on. Her name is Nori. And then instead of his mom having to attend high school with him, because no teenager wants that, they'll hire Miranda, who is a young nursing student. And to Harris, she is the perfect blend of orange and red to complement his blue. She's confident and outgoing and spontaneous, but she's also dealing with her own problems. And we're really not sure if she's helping or hurting Harris along this journey of self-identity.
Yeah. So and we will talk about the kind of overall cast of characters. I really thought that they were all so nicely fleshed out. Even the smaller side characters, which I don't know, we can talk about whether or not Jameer ever became an archaeologist. That was my favorite little bit that coming up. But what were some of the main for you? What were some of the main motivations for writing this novel?
When I started writing, I wanted a main character with a disability, and obviously I had to be SMA because I have my own experiences, and I felt like if I had a different disability, I wasn't qualified to really speak on behalf of that. But at the same time, I didn't want it to be a disability-centric story. Like, I didn't want people to be like, that's the disability book. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I still wanted it to be a very contemporary coming-of-age YA novel. And I thought that if disability was at the forefront of when I started writing this, then I'd probably be writing from like a place of anger in terms of inequality and how inaccessible the world is. But the character Harris that I wanted to craft is not an angry person, and I'm not an angry person, and this was not an angry story. So I knew that disability and what I kind of sought out to do was to weave in disability into his everyday life, because that's how it is for me. It's in how he gets up in the morning and the medications he has to do, and trying to become an independent student with technology, and how he navigates relationships and his family and care. So if I were to talk about those things and kind of just bring them up organically without pointing out one particular barrier, I think that it would be more successful, and people who are not disabled can empathize with him, and that's what I hoped to do with it.
Yeah, I really loved that it was to say that the book isn't about disability would be very wrong, but it very much about disability, but it's also about so much else. And as we were kind of talking about before, like I think like my background is in literary studies, and that's unfortunately not often the case, right? For better or worse. And I think what you do really well in The First Thing About You is to create this such a multidimensional character who is very much disabled, but very much just as much like a 15-year-old boy, and someone trying to figure out how to make friends and navigate a new space. And all of that is done through his lens and his experience, but the focus is on the experience and not on like the specifics of his disability. That is just his life, right? Like he is life in the body that he has.
Yeah, my favorite example and probably my favorite chapter in the book is when he goes on a date with Nori, his crush. And that kind of epitomizes the central kind of idea of like this balance between just being a teenager, but also being a disabled teenager. Because one, he has normal teenage anxiety of just being out with someone that he finds attractive alone without anyone else, his first date. But then at the same time, he's trying to figure out, well, I can't feed myself and we're out to lunch. I have to ask her to feed me. How do I approach that? So it's like these two things that are just very teenage, but also independently just his disability, an issue that no one else would deal with. And I think the way that chapter kind of unravels is, to your point, how do you sort of bring in those two subjects, and that's why that's one of my favorite chapters.
Yeah, like he is living his life in his body, and like we are following him in his life. And in so many ways I think it speaks to that sort of classic coming of age story that it is. And it is a coming of age story, and the person who is coming of age is also disabled and also dealing with hormones and friendship. Like I said, like all of those things are kind of, everyone comes of age. And so what does coming of age look like? In what ways is it the same, but it's also different? And that's what makes things special, right? Like that's what makes us.
Yeah.
Interesting. When you when we read your bio, it really emphasizes some of the similarities between you and Harris in terms of the specific diagnosis, which you've already addressed. Like, right, that is what you know, that is what you're going to write about.
Yeah.
What, other than kind of the date scene, were there any specific scenes or feelings or scenarios, however small, that like you really wanted to make sure to include and kind of communicate when you were writing the novel?
For me, it was just really important to convey Harris just wanting to fit in. That was really important. And then also the education side. When I was a student and I was his age, I really struggled with getting the support from the teachers and from the school. And it was really frustrating and stressful for my parents, right? And there was a really amazing scene where Harris and his mom are kind of fighting about the laptop that he's given that's broken. And Harris is like, you guys just, help me anyways. And she's like, this is your education, and I was probably the same way back then. I didn't understand what that could do for me. And now that I have all those resources, I kind of wanted to put that in. I think Harris comes to that conclusion slowly, and his parents really, really fighting for him. It's interesting because, like, I think I always say that Harris is a lot braver than I probably was at that age. I don't think I would have gone to the Halloween party, and if I did,
Super brave.
yeah, and if I did, and I could not get in, I definitely would not have used that sketchy ramp that they built out of plywood. Like, I just never in a million years would have done that. So it was like really fun to just live like vicariously through him, and like kind of how I wish my teenage experiences probably would have been. But like on the flip side, it's really hard for my family, like, especially my extended family, to not read this and see this as a biography. And they'll read it and they'll tell me on the phone. They'll say, "Oh my, I remember this happened." Like, no, that never happened. That was made up. And it's like there's very like I would say the overall general story never happened to me. There are scenes and feelings in there that I've experienced. But it's just funny, my family's perspective. And like, I remember this. I'm like, no, you only remember it because the character is disabled and you think it's me. But it's not me. This is not an autobiography. Like,
It's like the power of suggestion on
yeah,
massive level.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that you said that about the education stuff. I mean, as a teacher, right? Like, I hope that people understand that this is not the trouble that Harris has is not an exceptional case of
Mm-hmm.
trouble. It's something that, like, despite the legal protections surrounding it, it's
Mm-hmm.
still like I have heard so many things from students over the years in terms of like what they've experienced, that like just knowing, like, I don't know, becoming like aware of like the willingness to take an extra 5 minutes to scan documents
Yeah.
is can be insurmountable for some perspectives when like access really is just a 5 minute moment away.
Yeah. No, and I think that was the point is like Harris probably has teachers that do that. But
Mm-hmm.
the teacher that's making the most impact is the one that's not negatively, and I think that was really important to share.
Yeah, these things follow students forever. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, I've had my experience with teachers, and but I've had like other experiences with like just this summer even, where students have will talk about like they didn't even think they could ask for something even though I said they could, because they've had like the experience, like they just don't want to deal with it,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like,
feel that. Yeah,
yeah, like it's tired, it's exhausting, like
yeah.
rightfully so. um kind of going back to your family kind of thinking that it was so closely autobiographical, what, how do you think of yourself as different than Harris? I mean, Harris is way more brave than I was.
Yeah.
He had a way more exciting high school year than I ever had. Um, what do you think most clearly separates you from Harris?
Uh, it's definitely a lot of just Harris's bravery. Um, my parents would probably say that I judged a lot when I was his age. I probably did, but I think Harris is even more so. Um, Fortunately, I never really struggled making friends. Um, but I also wanted to put myself in Harris's shoes, in that sense, because as I get older, I do feel that sense of not being able to connect to my peers and people my age, as I get older. Back then, it wasn't as hard, right? Like, I think about it now, it's like, if you're disabled and like you're a kid, you're still living at home, and everyone's living at home. Everyone's being taken care of by their parents, and as you get older, they kind of transition out of that. And for people with disabilities, it's a little bit slower of a transition, so you tend to disconnect from the people around you. But I think like for Harris, yeah, I kind of want to write something that showed this like loneliness, but also like it was sort of self-induced at the same time. Like Harris wasn't lonely because like he was like doing the wrong things, but he was also doing the wrong things. Like yeah, it was sort of his fault of like not making the effort in certain relationships, thinking that other people should make the effort and not him. It's specifically when it came to Xander and learning about his new friend, and even within his family, what Harris knows about his brother. So, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest difference between us.
Yeah. Um, I I think I don't know. I feel like what I'm gonna say might give some away, but like I really liked especially like the way Ollie kind of, who's Harris's brother, for those who haven't read it, like his kind of, I don't know, he was like a slow burn character for me where he
Yeah,
was a lot and then
100%.
notice him more and more, and like he is just incredibly kind.
Yeah.
Um and I think, but like, so, and I guess this sort of also though brings us to the next question, is that like Harris is 15. He is on the cusp of being an older teen. He's not, super close to adulthood, but why was this such a special moment? Because he is still figuring out like how do I talk to people? Like, and he has all of like his difficulties are not the same as everyone with
Mm.
how he's making assumptions and what he sees and what he doesn't. But you know, 15-year-old kids are gonna do stuff. um so why was that such like an important moment for you to sort of zoom in on Harris for?
Yeah, I think the age was like, I don't want to say it was arbitrarily chosen because it wasn't. I think I wanted someone that was young, like what you're saying, was young, but not so young where it felt like taboo for him to go out and do the things that he was doing. If he was like, even 14, I feel like it's still much younger than someone that's 15 in a way. And like every year past that, you're like a lot more older, mature, if you will, than you were the year before. I feel like even if I made him a junior in high school, his experiences and the way he would have sort of approached his time there, I think would have been completely different. He probably would have been focused more on college and his future after that. And another thing is, I wanted there to be a significant age gap in the sense like I felt like 2 years between him and his brother, where it felt like they were starting to kind of separate from each other, and his brother was leaving, eventually going to college, wasn't even at the same high school as Harris. So just him trying to like Ollie protecting Harris, like when he goes to the party, trying to warn his parents all the things that are going to happen. So I feel like 15 was like the sweet spot between like adolescence and like full on being a teenager.
Yeah, like he doesn't have to, he also like doesn't need to figure out his college plans quite yet, and
Yeah,
he doesn't have a career path at this
right. It's
point.
like all his time, exactly. It's like all of his time is focused on just like being like a teen.
Yeah. I find that to be so special. Like,
Yeah.
when I think about myself as a 15-year-old, all I did was like play sports and watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like that was my life
Yeah.
at that point. And dealing with things like, is it dating or is it not dating? Because we held hands at lunch. Like, is
Right. I think you're almost still in like that junior high phase,
Mhm.
almost, right? And I feel like if I made Harris even a year older, a lot of his traits and bad characteristics would not be as easily forgivable as they are at that age. Because then you'd be like, oh, he kind of should know by now. That's not how you act as a human.
Maybe. Yeah, I should.
Yeah,
I,
maybe.
I, I think that's. I think right. 15 is like a good sweet spot for
Yeah,
that. Like,
yeah,
old enough to be doing things, but young enough to be pretty easily forgiven for your
yeah,
mistakes.
yeah.
For some, um, I, I'm gonna think of 15 forever as that now, and
15 Forever, that's a good title. It's a good title for something. Yeah,
should be like a band name.
yeah, I like that.
All right, well, so in we have Harris and we have all of like he has these different relationships that grow throughout the novel. We have his relationship with his parents and his mom and Ollie. We have his relationship with Xander, who you mentioned, who is his like buddy who has like such a sweet love of gum worms and yellow, and maybe I identify with Xander because yellow is also my favorite color. Um, we have Nori, who he is like his little dream, one of his dream girls in a lot of ways.
hmm
Miranda, how did you go about developing these characters? Were there any particular inspirations that you drew on? And who is the most difficult or challenging to write, and who is the most fun?
uh, right off the bat, Xander was the most fun. Because I felt like I could have him say anything, and it would be funny and just cute and adorable. And I just loved writing him. He reminds me so much of the friends I had growing up. Just yeah, I think he was kind of like most of the secondary characters are inspired just by people I've met over the 26 years of my life. Just kind of a
Hmm.
combination of all of them. Um, and then also I added of people I wish I knew at the same time that I wish were in my life, that could have guided me and supported me and kind of helped me in some of those more confusing situations. Um,
Mhm.
Miranda was definitely the hardest to write, just because her past and her life and problems that she's dealing with, it had to feel like there are things like her relationship with House is very provocative. Like almost like borderline, like pushing the line of like what should be in a YA novel. But in order for that to be successful, everything that's happened before kind of each milestone event of like her kissing him in the bathroom without getting consent and like her sneaking into his bedroom and lying with him in the middle of the night, like all of that had to feel um like not it wasn't acceptable, but her actions leading up to that kind of had to build up to those things happening. So a lot of the revisions was like my editor and I kind of going back and being like, okay, Miranda does this on page 300 or 200, so like on page 75 and page 100, like she kind of has to be doing this and this so that it makes sense here, and it was just sort of developing her character was hard, but also like challenging in like a fun way. Like I really enjoyed like learning about her.
Yeah. I can see that because she is. I think I find that you were very successful in kind of creating a character that is a very complex and not making the best choices, but
hmm
is trying, but also like she's a really um she has so many moments of like where you see her come through and you see her past, but then you see her really struggling. Like there's something that she's clearly wrestling with, that comes out over the course of the novel. And, you know, I think the way it resolves, I found to be very, I don't, appropriate doesn't sound like a very like
No,
logical, but it felt
I know what
fitting.
you mean. Yeah, because that final scene with them, like to be honest, if I can say, was one of the hardest chapters to write. It was probably the chapter I revised the most out of the process, because her apology and Harris's understanding and acceptance and his answer to that apology had to feel like he learned something and had changed as a person, and also that she had learned and changed as a person.
Yeah.
So whatever Harris says to her, um, it had to feel like he wasn't blowing her off, but that he understood she had taught him, and that he uh, learned and grew as a person because of her. But at the
Yeah.
same time, their kind of moment together is past. Like he has to move on. They both have to move on, and their relationship has gotten out the most of what it was supposed to, and that's really kind of like I'm happy you said like it felt like what it was supposed to feel like.
Yeah, I really was like even reading it like through the reading, I was like, I don't know how this is gonna end. Like,
Yeah.
is like how like what is the sort of ending? I don't want to say resolution because I at that point I was like, it doesn't have to be resolved or
Right,
what is
exactly.
like right. Like, so
That's the
what?
whole point. Like, yeah, if I
Yeah,
can say, like, um, there were parts of that during, like, when we revised it, we wrote the chapter. I would write the chapter as like as a solid as concrete no, and then I'd write it as a concrete yes, and then there was sort of like there has to be like this in between area where it's like I understand what you're doing, just not right now, but like maybe, and like the reader ends the book with like well, what happens? Do they ever see each other? Like, are they in each other's lives? We don't know, right? It's
mhm,
open.
yeah. And I like the sort of the realization that Harris comes to in terms of like what Miranda is dealing with
Mm-hmm.
is not really his responsibility, and
Mm-hmm.
that as something that is both freeing for him but kind of, you know, it's a loss in a way, but it is in some ways like him recognizing it's not me that is causing her these problems is I
Mm-hmm.
think also really a powerful moment for him
Mm-hmm.
of like being able to stand in that and be like, this is, you know, I'm going to set a boundary that.
Yeah, I think this is like boundary is a perfect word. My editor and I we would pass around the phrase like codependency throughout the entire revision process. Like they were just unhealthy codependency with each other. But she had the same kind of relationship with her boyfriend, Brad WC, and she had the same probably the same relationship with her friend that passed away. And I think for Harris, he's never really had a friendship like that. So for him, any person confiding in him and sharing their secrets and opening up to him is like this entire universe that he's just never experienced. But it took something really tragic and the sudden disappearance of her, and then him realizing what he's lost in return because of her really opens him up to like, hey, like you're saying, that's not my problem. Like the thing she's going through, I can't fix her. Like that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. um so yeah, you bring up like they're kind of, they get to this sort of codependent state, and it is this like has become like a not positive form of like codependency. And one of the things that I was going to ask you about like more broadly in the novel is kind of your representation of care, and because there's a lot of different forms of care happening, I think, with a lot of different characters. There's, you know, the very sort of practical elements of care that Harris experiences and asks for and needs, and from his mom and from Miranda, and like the kind of health related forms of care, there is, the question of, we see like Miranda really struggling over not having taken care of someone. We see Nori taking care of her dad by cooking him dinner every night, despite, him being a vegetarian. We see, we see a lot of different instances of care that are both physical, but also these emotional relationships that keep going. What do you want readers to understand about the importance of kind of care in its different forms, in term, based on your novel and where it came from there?
Yeah, I think I wish I could say a lot of that was done on purpose. I think it just worked out that way, that we see. Especially Nori. I'm glad you brought her up, because we only know what she's doing because of what she tells Harris. Everything is through Harris's eyes. So we don't really understand her relationship with her dad now that her mom has passed. And if she enjoys doing that, we think she enjoys taking care of her dad. We at least hope she does. But yeah, Kara's a big, right? Yeah, and she enjoys cooking. That's what she wants to do as for her career when she, So I think I would say it like this. The scene when Harris gets rushed to the hospital. Miranda makes the whole idea of Miranda being a nurse is that she kind of wants redemption of her friend kind of passing away. That she feels like that's her fault. She could have saved her friend from overdosing and dying. And the fact that she does something to Harris, that she makes a choice, and it hurts another person, that was kind of the idea that I was trying to really push forward with their relationships in terms of care, is that if that makes sense. And then for the parents, I wanted to show that sort of everyday caregiving of just of a family that has a son who's disabled. But at the same time, Harris often feels like a burden to them. He's sort of doesn't say it explicitly, but we feel it in certain scenes, especially once Miranda disappears and the mom has to be with him again, and sort of her slow breakdown. So there's all these ideas of what a person does for one another. Even the brother, we learn about at the end what he does to save the student at his high school who's in a wheelchair, and protecting her. She's in a wheelchair from being bullied by his teammates. And there's this awesome conversation between him and Harris about who they are as people, and would he have done that if Harris wasn't his brother? So yeah, I feel like it was in there, and it just happened organically and naturally, and I think that's why it comes across the way it does.
Can I also say I loved how when that conversation happened between Harris and Ollie, it was also juxtaposed with
in the
Ollie,
bathroom. Yeah,
Harris in the bathroom, and the idea that that's because
that's just their life. It's their life. Yeah,
what life is, right?
Yeah,
and it's peeing. That's it.
No, in the bathroom. Yeah, it's
right.
Exactly. No, to that point, it's their life. Ollie is helping his brother in the bathroom, and at the same time, they're having this existential conversation about if they lived different lives, would they be the same person? Yeah, it's perfect for that. But that's just who they are.
It was such it had a really good punchline too, for lack of a better word. What was going on? Have a couple more, and then we'll go to some of the audience questions. Mm-hmm. But kind of to keep with I guess the lighter tone, many teenagers, a big part of Harris's life is wanting some romance. Super kind, right? Like a lot of, and he thinks about this in relation to Xander too, when he's trying to think about like what he did as a friend to Xander,
Yeah.
where were his thoughts, um, and a lot of his thoughts and actions are really done in relation to Miranda and Nori. And so, what was your favorite part of writing, you know, the line of the novel that is a teenage love story?
Uh, the ending, like the last chapter, it's just so cliche, and Harris is so self-aware that everything around, like he's like, my life is not a teenage rom-com, but then at the same time he's like, meeting Nori at the top of a hill at a park, and it's beautiful outside, and they kiss. It's like all these things that are just so like over the top cliche, but like has to be that way, and then Harris being like, but I don't live in a rom-com. Like my life is not like this. And I think yeah, that was just really fun. That was like one of my favorite parts to write. It was yeah, there's a lot like just when they go to karaoke for Nori's birthday, um and Harris saying how he can't hold the microphone, and Nori said she'll hold it for him, but then she's swaying back and forth, and he can't follow. It's like all these kind of like little nuancy things, that I think like quantify or like what or qualify what it is for him, what romance is for him at that stage. As he even admits, like his relationship with Nori is gonna be different. Like he can't just go up to her and grab her hand or give her a hug or kiss her on the lips. Like that's just not physically possible. So he's gonna have to ask her like at the end. He's like, "Can I hold your hand?" Like there's all these little things that I just think were really beautiful and fun to write, and that was kind of my favorite part. Just the tiny, tiny details that I was able to put in there.
Yeah, like those little what's the sweet bits? I don't know.
Yeah.
Were there any scenes or ideas that you drafted or had planned to include in the novel that kind of ultimately didn't make it in the final draft?
Yeah. The reason Miranda leaves is different from the original draft. Even the original one I signed with my publisher, their relationship gets pushed in the original version a lot farther than what it does, forcing her to leave. And it's funny because like at that time when I was talking to publishers, I was like very stuck on like keeping that. I was like, I don't care how provocative it gets. And my publisher and my editor had no problem with it. But I remember during one of the rounds of revisions, going back to the point where everything Miranda does had to be justified. So it was like, all right, if this happens, everything before that, you have to have that build up. And we just couldn't get to a place where it felt like as wrong as what Miranda does, it just doesn't feel like she would authentically do that thing. And I remember my editor never told me. I just cut it out. I probably deleted like 15 pages and rewrote another 15 pages and sent it her way. And I remember she was like, it just fits so, it feels like this is what it's supposed to be. Um,
Mhm.
so I think the fact that it was so easy for me to take that out was why it was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Uh, there's
Yeah.
that. That was probably the biggest part. And then originally the book did not end the way it ends with them kind of on top of the hill. I then went on to write like 5 or 8 pages of them finishing the physics project and presenting it and making a fool of themselves, like singing their rap song and making a music video, and I was just like, no, this is over the top. Like I kind of just want to end it here. So I enjoy the way the book ends, the way it does.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I think based on what you said about Miranda, I think pushing it much farther would have really changed her character.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
you're 100% right. Instead of her just being like this kind of like sort of dangerous, it turned into danger. And then
yeah,
and then her character became a lot more dark
yeah.
um, than I intended her to be.
Hmm. Um, I yeah, I think I think you probably made the right choice. I like that.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to start moving to some of the audience questions. So for those of you who haven't, please feel free to drop some more questions in the Ask a Question button. And we're going to start with what was your writing process like? Did you draft or just write it and decide as you went? So essentially, plotting or pantsing is I think the.
Yeah, I wish I was more organized when I write. I think I wrote about the first like 30 or so pages, and then I was kind of like, all right, I have something here. I kind of know where I want it to go, but I don't know all the stuff in between yet. So I took like probably 2 days and just mapped out like one bullet point for every chapter. I want like literally just one line for every chapter I wanted to write. Like Harris goes on a date, Harris goes to a football game, Miranda sneaks into his bedroom, like stuff like that, kind of drafting it out from there and then expanding on those ideas was mainly the process.
Okay. So kind of a little bit in between.
Yeah.
Are there aspects of the book that changed as you wrote it, and I guess we talked about this a little bit, but did it end up where you kind of originally imagined it? Were there any sort of like substantial, like overall things that came to be in the process?
I think Miranda and Harris's relationship formed differently than I thought it would. Originally, it was just supposed to be her being like the tool nurse, like the person teaching him, and that turned into a lot more than that. And I think I was happy with it because I didn't plan it, and it just sort of naturally happened and formed that way. But that was probably like the biggest change from the original idea. And then, like I said, the reason why she leaves changed as well.
Without any spoilers, were there any scenes that you had to decompress from after writing?
Wow. No, I don't know. I did a big rush anytime. The thing is, like, the story was personal, but also not personal to me at the same time. So yeah, I feel like I take breaks. Like I think when towards the middle when Miranda leaves and the thing that happens to Harris, and he gets sick. You I kind of took like a step back and just kind of like reflected, but I was like happy. It wasn't like I was like upset or feeling anything other than like, wow, like I really liked how that turned out. Like I feel really good about that.
Nice. So it's kind of like cathartic and
Yeah,
affirming that
a
way.
lot of like my writing for me is like therapeutic and like things I want to say I just can't in any other medium other than this.
Well, yeah, I think that's true a
It's
lot, right?
probably
Like,
most writers, yeah.
well, I mean, that's right. Whenever I talk to students about like writing and I have to share like what my favorite thing about writing is, it's always that like I think writing helps us understand things like as a
Yeah.
process. And I think that's cool. Like
Mhm.
like I think like when I write and I come to ideas and I it goes places that I didn't expect, or I get better at things that I don't know. I think that's a
Yeah.
really cool thing about
No,
writing.
writing is like it's like a muscle. It's like any other muscle. You just have to practice. Like there are days when I don't. It's the last thing I want to do is write, but I have to do it because I love doing. Once I'm doing it, I love it. But you just have to get better at it. It's the only way to do it.
Can I quote that to my students?
Yeah, 100%. I might have stole that from a musician when he talks about making music and that some days he doesn't like making music, but he has to do it. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Um, I teach at a university. It is very like hard sciences heavy. And so I get a lot of it takes too long. And I'm like, but everything takes a long time. I get it, right? Like it's just, it's hard, but it is a muscle and it's a muscle you don't realize is a muscle until you work it like it's a muscle, I think.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
it's, and it's hard. Like,
Yeah. No, I mean, they're like kind of going back to the writing process question. Like,
Mhm,
I kind of force myself to sit down and write for 2 hours a day, like
mhm.
at least 2 hours. And whether I sit there and I write nothing or I wrote 1,000 words, like at least I tried. So I can't be mad at myself, whatever the outcome is. Although sometimes I am mad at myself because I want to be productive and like deadlines, I have to be productive, right? But yeah, I think that as long as you feel like you're actively trying, that's when you're gonna feel confident about what you're doing.
And even if you're just like thinking as part of your writing time,
Yeah.
that's a part
Most
of
of my some of my best writing happens when I'm trying to sleep. Yeah.
yeah. Like, when I was writing my dissertation, I would wake up and like put notes in my phone. I would say 75% of the time I would read them and be like, that makes no sense. That was something I thought was great at 12:30 at night. But yeah, like we come to these things as we go. Uh, what is the most important message that you want your readers to know?
Um, I just wish people just see Harris on a human level. They empathize with the struggles that he experiences as a teenager, not just disability, but then I also hope that the disability community can say, "Hey, I relate to this. Like I felt the same way." So
Mm-hmm.
kind of both sides of those, and then like one of the something that was really intentional, and I sort of commented on this in the beginning was I didn't want to lecture anybody during this about disability.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best feedback I've gotten so far was someone said that it taught them without lecturing or lecturing them. And I thought that was like really, it really touched me and made me happy because that was super, super intentional throughout this entire process.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like right, it's a classic showing not telling in terms of
Yeah.
like we're going to show you what this
Yeah.
experience is and you're going to read it. And so you
Right.
can learn about it.
Like
Learn-
for me, it was so important. Like, never once in the entire novel do I use the word ableist or ableism or like anything like that because it just felt like to me it would have taken the reader out of the story. It's just not how Harris would talk. It's not how he would describe things.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean that was important to me to feel like someone who has never been around someone with disability to come out of it and feel like I understood, I empathized with him. And then
Yeah.
someone who is disabled to say, I've done that has happened to me. That same thing.
Um no, I think that like the I personally found the way that you represented it to do a really good job at
Yeah.
just that, and while also like challenging so many like assumptions about disability and so many kind of patterns of representation of the past that this is
Mm-hmm.
not right in a very good way, and in
Mm-hmm.
a very positive move. So I found that
Yeah,
successful.
thank you. Yeah.
Do you have any like favorite representations of disability that you kind of go back to?
Uh, I honestly wish I could say yes, right? Because then that would mean that there was more out there. Um,
Hmm.
but there was not. There are TV shows. I'm a big fan of the show Atypical, which is on Netflix. I know that some people don't like it, some people like it. I think the way it's sort of filmed is very lighthearted, and we understand Sam, who has autism. I don't think that actor has autism, which is a big issue. Um, uh,
They, I think if I remember correctly, like the second, I haven't watched it yet because it was hard, but I have heard really positive things about the second and I think third season
yeah,
because
those are amazing. Yeah,
they brought more like autistic creators into the
yeah.
writers' room and stuff like that.
There's another show called Everything's Gonna Be Okay, and the sister has autism, and I know that actress has autism. So there is disability representation that I don't see much physical disability representation ever. And if it is, it's like adult like Me Before You was just super sappy and like not at all how a disability, like the actor is not a bit, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
one of my favorite films though, is it's a French film called The Untouchables, and it was made into a film here with Kevin Hart. What is it called? It's about a man who is a quadriplegic and is very wealthy, and kind of his relationship with his caregiver. I didn't like the American version of it. I thought the French version, even
Mhm.
with subtitles, is much better. But I thought that was, even though the actor is not disabled, I felt like the idea of having someone take care of you and how personal that is, of a very total stranger, like helping you in the bathroom and getting you dressed and all that stuff was portrayed, in my opinion, very accurately.
Yeah, my question was like partially selfish just so I can have more suggestions for people as well, because I also feel like I run out of.
The upside, that's it Kevin Hart
Okay.
and the actor from Breaking Bad, Bryan Cranston.
Mhm.
But I like the French version better, The Untouchables. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, we have one more audience question, and then I have one more for you. But do you have
Yeah.
any other books in the work? What's on the horizon for you?
I do, yeah. So I just finished second novel. It is not a sequel. I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who was hoping for that. Um, I'm right now in the process of the first round of revisions, and it still has disability representation, but not told from. So the way I explain it is, um, I like the idea of taking a theme from a previous story. So, for example, in The First Thing About You, I didn't have enough space to really dig deep with Harris's relationship with his older brother Ollie. Like, we understand they love each other, they support each other, and that's shown at the end. And I wish I just had more pages to get deeper with that. So I thought a lot about, well, what if I wrote a story that's about siblings where one of them is disabled and one isn't, and what is that dynamic like? And then also, if their family is the complete opposite of Harris's, which is loving and supportive, what if I throw them into something that's very dysfunctional and mentally abusive? But you still have these two siblings that love each other very much. And if I tell that story from the point of view of the sibling that's not disabled,
Mhm.
and sort of what they're dealing with in that situation, so that'll
Okay.
be out eventually.
Do you have a date at all, or a zone? No.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be waiting.
Yeah.
Um, my kind of last question that I like to ask kind of people as a closing, is if someone wanted to get to know you better, what book would you recommend they read
Oh
other than
man.
other than your own book? It can be like your sense of humor. It can be just something that you loved or were obsessed with for a while, or
People are
anything.
gonna hate. You're gonna get me in trouble for this answer, but I'm gonna be honest.
Okay.
Um, Catcher in the Rye is like, I know it. It was the first book I ever read. And I'm like, wow, you can write with just a random like stream of consciousness like that. I didn't know that. It's very sarcastic. I think a lot, and like my brain operates the same way, just like running and running and running and nonstop the way Holden's does. So that's definitely one. The Westing Game, um, it's sort of a children's murder mystery. The Giver was another book that I was really drawn to.
I loved The Giver when I was
Yeah,
growing up.
yeah, the entire series, The
Mhm.
Outsiders, really classic stuff like that. Yeah.
Nice. Well, that is my kind of version of what would you recommend as an endpoint, just to share a little bit about you. So, we are kind of winding down. We are at the about the end of our time. So I would love to really thank Chaz again. Thank you for spending time with us and for sharing your book with us. We are so excited to be able to participate in the launch. I'm so happy that like about the feedback you're getting. Congratulations again on having the sort of one of the best must-read books for the fall, according to People. I I love People magazine, so I'm a big fan of like celebrity gossip and all that.
Thank
That is
you.
a lot of what I spend my time on. So People is I take the recommendations. But congratulations again. I know it's been a pretty whirlwind week for you. And I'll give you a little round of applause and I will.
Thank you.
I'm really bad at ending things. But congrats. And we look forward to, the next book when it comes out. Also, I am a terrible bookstore owner. Everybody remember to get the book. It's right here. If you click this button and you get the signed book plate by Chaz.
You have to do it like you have to do it like a YouTuber. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel.
It.
Yeah, smash that button down
smash
there.
That button and then smash the other button on the next page.
Yeah.
Help us support Chaz. Help us get the word out. The book is so fun. It's so sweet. The characters are so original and nuanced and very easy to fall in love with. So thank you again for everything. And one last congratulations. And I hope you have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you and good night to everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.